Hey, welcome to Split Your Head podcast. I'm your host, Bob, and I've got a special guest on today, the fabulous Louise Ward. She's a Vancouver-based filmmaker who's created a ton of transgressive films, such as Computer Hearts, SIDS, Ambition, to name just a few, all put out through her production company, Cybercraft Video. She also presented the exhilarating 100 Best Kills Texas Birth Control Dick Destruction. That's a mouthful. At the Fantastic Fest last year, which is just mind-blowing to say the least. She's worked alongside the late extreme horror director Ryan Nicholson, and her next film is a wildly ambitious 6.5-hour project that she is currently working on. And she also has an amazing podcast with Aoife called Trans Panic, which, I feel like I'm just like touching the tip of the iceberg of all the things you're doing, Louise. But let's just get right into it.
I mean, first of all, I just want to say thanks for pronouncing my name correctly with Ward, because a lot of people struggle with it. Because I've been introduced numerous times at many events over the last 2 years, and that's always like an exciting thing for me because I spelled my last name stupid on purpose so that you could say it weird, because I'm a pretty weird person. But I love it. Whenever someone gets it right with Ward, I'm always very excited. It's like, oh, they've done their research. They know what they're talking about.
I'm still a rookie in the podcast interviewing game, but that was like one nugget of research I did. I was like, it's Ward, baby. I got it. So let's start off with the latest project that you're working on. You just had a Kickstarter that was up in June. So it's a 6.5-hour project. Does it have a title yet?
Well, I have a title for it, but I don't want to tell the title because I have this like great idea in my head, which is the movie is finished and it gets into some big film festival. And then you see the title of the movie and you go, how the hell is this movie at a big film festival? So that's the dream. So I've kind of kept it hidden, but I mean, if you're paying attention, I have given it away numerous times. It may even be in the crowdfunding campaign itself, which, I'm going to say, on the podcast, because I believe this is going to be in July that this comes out.
Totally.
It was so great how all that money came in the last 3 days, and we got our full budget raise for the podcast.
Hell yeah.
Wonderful.
We did it.
We did it. I've got my crystal ball out in front of me as we record. But
I love the positivity.
Yeah. But it's been really exciting. I honestly, like, regardless of how the crowdfunding ended up going, the one thing I can say is that seeing this massive outpour of support for such a weird, unruly movie is honestly just warms my heart. I never could have expected this. I never really wanted to approach the film with crowdfunding in mind. I wanted to, kind of shoot through and then have this movie that no one knew I was making. And it's this massive, crazy epic that everyone goes, wow, how did I not know that she was working on this? But what ended up happening was because of the writer's strike. I work in the film industry in Vancouver. That basically shut off my consistent full-time job. So what that meant was the money I was putting aside to be shooting every weekend suddenly vanished. And now I'm only making enough to sustain my living expenses. So, I will starve for art. I have done that many times throughout my career. I'm doing that right now because we are still shooting the movie, even though this is happening. But I do have dreams for who I want contributing music to the soundtrack, and there's actors who we need to fly in order to shoot with, and those are all things that actually do cost money. So depending on what happens, it's kind of cool. Like, you're Canadian, right, Bob? You're Canadian? Yeah, hell yeah.
I don't know why I said hell yeah. I'm in Toronto. Yeah.
Okay,
Toronto,
I think that's what Dion told me, was you're Toronto based. So one of the coolest things for me as someone who loves Canadian cinema is that one of my favorite movies in the whole world is called Crime Wave, which is a 1985 movie made in Winnipeg by this guy John Pays, and it is, to me, one of the highlights of Canadian cinema. It's this super fun movie about a screenwriter who's trying to write like the perfect, what he calls the full color crime movie. And it's like one of the most, like, to me, important Canadian films I've ever seen. It's a beautiful movie about like the spirit of youth and the creative process and where you find inspiration from. And the director of that, I actually reached out to him and I said, hey, will you have a cameo in my movie? And he starred in the movie, directed Crime Wave. So this will be like his return to acting after that. And so I was hoping to have money to like go and do a full like cameo with him, have him in a scene. But if that, you know, if depending on how money works out with the budget of the movie, then I'm still, you know, I'm always resilient. Otherwise, it's just like a voice cameo because I have roles for that as well. Dion and I did the same thing when we had Larry Fessenden in Cold Wind Blowing. Right. It was like he was supposed, we had pitched him coming down to be in the film, playing the character who's like the Hank the Tank, the trucker who like comes to rescue them and gets killed. Right. That was written for Larry Fessenden. He was unfortunately shooting his movie Depraved during the same time we were shooting our movie. So we said, well, hey, would you just we have this other voice cameo role. Would you do that instead? And he was like, hell yeah, I will. So we were able to record that with him still. So me and Dion were like, have always been really versatile filmmakers where if we have something we want, we'll find a way to compromise and still get it, even if things don't work out perfectly.
Cool. It sounds like you kind of need that, really, right?
Honestly, like coming from like the underground filmmaking world, like you mentioned the work I did with like Ryan Nicholson, like that's where you learn where it's like, okay, you have to be spontaneous and adjust to any adversity that comes at you. Because at the end of the day, you still have to get the movie finished. And anything that you could find that's in that middle ground of like having to take a compromise, but still making it artistically work for the project. That's where like the real art comes from. And I think that's like really, you know, like really what separates like people who can like keep going forward in this industry from people who maybe have this sort of like lofty ambition of like what they think they need to make a movie as opposed to working with what they have to make a movie.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of like this punk rock sense that I love about like indie horror filmmaking, you know, like you really have to like push through glass ceilings and shatter them to kind of create like wild art. So that's to me, that's exciting, you know? Yeah.
No, like that's what it's all about. Like for me, it's always been like doing boundary pushing stuff, whether that's like the stuff that we were doing that was like super edgy or just trying to be like, okay, like when me and Dion were doing movies like Cold and Blowing, or when we produced our friend Joost Graton's movie Cuties, it was like, okay, we've got these like crazy ambitious scripts. Right. How can we pull them off with no money? And in both cases, we were able to like produce like what I think are like really cool, interesting indie underground movies. And like, I guess it's because I came from that world, growing up in the underground film scene and being obsessed with these guys who were able to like make truly like interesting, transgressive art with very little resources.
Who are some of the big names that you could just like spout off right now?
Oh, like, okay,
or not like, big names, like any names.
Yeah. Like I mean, like Ryan Nicholson was like such a huge influence on me.
Cool.
Like to the point where like when I met him at a little film festival called Splatterfest that was ran by my friends who would do this like Night Terrors monthly screening series. They built up over like all the program they were doing to this film festival called Splatterfest. So they flew in Ryan, they flew in William Lustig to screen his Printomaniac.
Oh,
they
sick.
had Greg Lamberson showing the sequel to what was it, Slime City Massacre or whatever.
Okay.
So it was like, you know, doing all of these like guys who were like making movies with like no money, and we're still pulling off like really cool art with it. And I met Ryan at that festival. I was like 16 years old. And he said to me, like, hey, if you ever find yourself in Vancouver, hit me up for a job. So once I turned 18, I moved to Vancouver and I reached out to him on email. I hadn't really heard back from him. And then I bumped into him at a Goblin concert. And like, I was like, hey, do you remember me? And he goes, oh my God, like, of course I remember you. Hey, I did get your email. We're just at like heavy in pre-production on this movie. Do you want to come and be my assistant on it? And then I came out and I was like, doing every possible role in the movie. I was like camera trainee. I was like gaffing the movie, doing all the lighting. I was like in every little role. I think he asked me to act in it at one point. I was like, I don't know about that. I no. So he had his son play the role that he had suggested I could play. But like, it was, that was for the movie Caller. which was like is like a dirty, crazy Vancouver like nasty underground flick. So like Ryan was a big influence. Like, I mean, I grew up seeing movies like Gutterballs and stuff, which like to me, when I was young, I was like a young queer person who loved horror movies. A lot of the times it was only in these underground flicks where I would actually see like queer people or trans people. Like Gutterballs has a really famous, like extremely transphobic kill in it where like this trans girl gets her penis cut off.
That was in 100 Best Kills, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. It was indeed.
Okay.
Which was one of the clips I got complaints. One of the clips I actually got complaints about from people afterwards. They were like, "Why did you put that in?" And they were like, they said to me like, this one woman approached me and she was like, "I just think we're past the point of having to see things like that." And I said,
"Huh."
Some of these like trans girls getting their dicks cut off are from movies made like 2 years ago. Like we're absolutely not past that point. And if it makes you uncomfortable, maybe think about like, you know, why it's making you uncomfortable, right?
Yeah, for sure,
Because I think it's really interesting to be contextualizing these things, especially in a show like that where you're seeing them all next to each other, and it's like, oh god, like this happens a lot.
Totally, yeah.
It's weird that it happens as often as it does, right? Like especially from all these filmmakers who aren't like transgender. It's like this idea of like thinking about the practical use of like, oh, what could you do? What would a trans woman do in a movie? It's like, oh, maybe she cut her dick off, or someone will cut her dick off, right? It's like really weird.
Right. Yeah.
But I mean, I've been doing that in all my movies, but there's
the
definitely
castration.
Like, yeah, I love the castration, but it's always through a different lens because for me, it's never about like dysphoria. It's more like this interesting, like liberating body horror stance. Like it's more Cronenbergian in its intent rather than like being more like this like old trans exploitation movie type thing. But,
so it's not like a spectacle that's just solely supposed to titillate. It's something that's supposed to like get you to think about it, right?
Yeah, like I mean, like when Ryan talked about like the inspiration for that scene in Gutterballs, he said it was like, oh, I just wanted to see like a dick get turned into a pussy. Like I thought that'd be really funny, and it's like, you know, it's a gross horror image, and like I love Ryan. Like Ryan taught me everything I know about filmmaking. Yeah. And to get back to my initial point, it was like seeing those movies or like trauma movies that had like that skirted with these like homophobic and transphobic like representations, but those were the only things I was seeing growing up. Like I could watch like the Toxic Avenger Part 4 and be like, oh, like me and my boyfriend, this is like the only place we're seeing like queer characters in like something that's like speaking more to like our level as like weird edgy punks or whatever, and like seeing ourselves in that world. So that was the world we wanted to be in. So like that's how I always kind of embraced genre, and that's why I really liked the underground like horror scene. It really accepted me at the time, but there was something that kind of flipped in like the early 2010s into the mid 2010s where that underground film scene started to become more hostile towards like queer people and stuff, because like at the end of the day, like a lot of these filmmakers who are making these sorts of movies are coming from like kind of like a white trash background, which like, you know, I'm from like rural Canada. I grew up in Alberta and Saskatchewan. Like I definitely like relate to those experiences, but it's like it started to become more hostile towards queer people at a certain point. And that was kind of when me and Dion made the switch towards going into the direction of stuff like Inferno and Hex Dead Room and Cold and Blowing, which was kind of us going away from that underground mentality and trying to do something that was like, I don't like the term like elevated in particular, but like that's what we were striving for, was like something more elevated than like, you know, something more elevated than underground horror, you know, like we weren't making movies where I cut my dick off anymore. Right.
Yeah. Sorry to go back to what you're saying. So after the 2010s horror, are you talking about like extreme horror necessarily? Because I've kind of wondered that if there's been like a switch from like maybe more left-leaning to right-leaning kind of stuff popping up in that scene.
Well, it's kind of interesting, and like we could talk about this for hours, but like what I think kind of happened was like the extreme horror or underground horror. I kind of use those two interchangeably. Like I would say like August Underground is an underground horror flick as well as like an extreme horror flick. Like both underground horror and extreme horror both like rely on like gore and shock value and like things that you can put in without a huge budget, right? Because like you're making a horror movie with no money. You can't have any like big cast. You can't have any like big effect, like big like visual effects. Like you're not making like a big Blumhouse movie or something, right? So what you can rely on is being gross and shocking, and that can pay off in really good ways. Like I'm a huge fan of like the vomit gore movies. I think those are like really artistic, even
Which
though
ones
they
are
have
those?
this like intent. Those are like Lucifer Valentine made them in like the late 2000s and early 2010s. They're like called like regurgitated sacrifice, stuff like that.
I saw one of them a long time ago, and it was
probably slaughtered vomit dolls. Yeah,
I think so.
Exactly.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like they're
sorry.
Go on. Like I find that kind of stuff interesting, right? And the reason I find it interesting is because at that time, to be like anti-establishment meant to be like doing these movies that like played in this transgressive space where it's like this will never be mainstream. We're trying to depict things that push the envelope that you could never get out of like mainstream filmmaking. But what I think happened around the time that Trump got elected is that people started to view like this sort of more like liberal politics as like the mainstream culturally. Where people were kind of like projecting this idea that like woke culture or whatever, or like queerness or all these like sort of things, inclusion of like Black people and Indigenous people and like all these sorts of ideas as now being the mainstream, because they felt that they couldn't like, they were for the first time seeing those perspectives in a mainstream context. So then we had like the underground starting to move into movies like Hate Crime or some of the other stuff that was coming out at the mid 2010s, like underground boom, that was kind of more like, even like Collar is responsible for this, where it's like, oh well, let's make a movie that's all about like killing sex workers or something, right? Like it's like, oh, let's do something that's like anti-woke, and this is long before that sort of language was being used. But you could see that kind of coming out of it in like, especially in like the way that like filmmakers, even in like New York or like other places, whereas traditionally underground film came out of like places that weren't like film centers, we were starting to see people kind of appropriating that language in like major film centers to try to like make movies that were like transgressive in a way that more so like encapsulated this like sort of like dirtbag political philosophy. I could talk about this for hours. I mean, like that's like the whole point of my podcast, my podcast with Aoife, right? Is like trying to interrogate the way in which like underground horror shifted over the last decade, and trying to like use filmmakers to sort of like see where it's going. Like, I mean, it's kind of fascinating how like a movie like The Sweet East, which was premiered at Cannes, is like got these sorts of ideas that you would find in an underground movie. Like it opens with like a Pizzagate sort of riff and stuff like that. Those are sorts of things you'd see in an underground movie, and now it's kind of become more artful or mainstream just because of like the way in which that language has been appropriated by like some of these more like metropolitan filmmakers, right? So it's fascinating to me because I mean, I live in a major city. I make like work that I consider to be like more elevated, like more thoughtful than I was seeing in like some of the underground films that were starting to come out by the time I left the underground. So to me, I'm really fascinated with these movies that try to tie the two together.
Well, I'm just wondering if and this is maybe just like hypothetical, but like, is it possible to stay within the realm of like extreme horror, underground horror, and sort of challenge this changing of like left to right wing sort of politics?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm really curious about it because we're actually starting to see movies that are extreme horror getting a lot more praise. Like I think that movies like Terrifier 2 are definitely working within like that tradition of extreme underground horror. But that was like a big successful movie. But as far as my feelings on it, it's not especially a political movie.
No, not at all. Yeah.
Like Terrifier 1, the first Terrifier, when I saw it, I could kind of feel like especially the violence towards women was like so mean spirited. I was kind of like, I wonder if this is like trying to like pay homage to like a movie like Maniac, where it's like, okay, like these old transgressive movies used to be like, okay, let's see like how far we can push this. And I respect them on that level, but I'm not, I don't really know I wouldn't really say they have that political angle. It's almost more apolitical. So, I mean, we are, there's definitely all sorts of modes of doing it. I definitely think that we're seeing a boom right now of people wanting to see violence in movies again, and wanting to see stuff that doesn't sort of like coddle them in the way that mainstream cinema has sort of like homogenized everything. Because everyone consumes movies through like the same few streaming platforms nowadays. I think that there is a lot of room, and why like saying like Terrifier 2 was so successful is like, I think that audiences are hungry for something different. And I think that the most different you can get that's transgressive without going like too far in a way that an audience won't accept is like that extreme violence and gore, which like I've always been a huge fan of violence and gore in movies. I'm a huge fan of practical effects, right? So I mean, I'm excited to see it. I mean, as we've been pitching new projects, it's been amazing how many companies, especially who make horror movies, are really interested to try to exploit the extreme cinema angle now. It's like,
oh, really?
Yeah, no, it is interesting how the industry shifted. People saw the success of stuff like Terrifier 2 and they go, okay, well, no, like gore's back on the menu. Like, let's try to do stuff that's like more violent, more extreme.
Well, I think with Terrifier 2, one of the big things that really helped it gain a lot of success was almost this like Roger Corman-esque theatrical gimmick vibe to it, because like I don't know if you saw it in the theaters, but when my friend and I went and saw it in the theaters, some kid actually got up and vomited in the lobby.
Amazing.
Like, no lie,
that's so
that
cool.
happened. And so you hear those stories.
That's
and
so cool.
Yeah, it's kind of.
I'm so happy. It makes me so happy to hear that that's happening with like a modern movie, because like I remember vividly when I was a teenager, my buddies who ran that Splatterfest thing, they had flown in a print of Cannibal Holocaust that they showed on 35 millimeter. And I vividly remember a woman walking into the lobby and just vomiting in the lobby during the turtle scene. And it was like, that's visceral filmmaking. Like, that's awesome. That's so cool. So like, I definitely want to do that. I mean, like with the new movie, Castration movie, there's definitely stuff that I think is going to really push the envelope, especially towards the ending. And then like other movies I'm producing right now, I'll similarly have like these sequences that I think are going to like really mess with people's heads. And I'm happy with that. I want to make some movies that can get that, incite that visceral reaction in people.
Wait. So your 6.5 hour film, I don't want to spoil it, but it leads into extreme horror, because I watched the first.
Of course, I hope it's okay. How would?
Oh, okay. I didn't know. Because I watched the first hour, 10 minutes of it, of what you said. Is it okay that I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It? Okay, cool. It to me
let's
was
talk
like
away.
a
I sense
really
you
striking
want to talk
drama.
About it. This is cool.
Yeah. No, it's a really striking drama. It really pulled me in.
That's the point.
And it reminded me of like Dogma 95 with the aesthetic. It reminded me of like, I mean, initially I was like, oh, I'm getting a bit of like a Scenes from a Marriage kind of vibe, you know, and then a bit of like a Fassbinder-y vibe. But I just was like, okay, this is not really extreme horror. Like Louise is on a totally other vibe here. But this is really cool. Because when I saw it was like a 6.5 hour film, I'm like, this is going to be experimental as fuck. I didn't know you were going to do like a full on like hardcore narrative drama. But now you're telling me there's extreme horror elements in this? Like, holy shit.
So this is it.
Yeah, so go on.
So this is the setup for the movie. Let's do it. Let's get into it. So, okay. So we gotta go way back. We gotta go way back to 10 years ago. I made a little movie called Computer Hearts. Which,
amazing.
When I had the idea for Computer Hearts, I was absolutely obsessed with mumblecore. I thought that was the coolest thing happening in movies, like stuff that like Funny Ha Ha, or like Baghead, or like what Tao Lin and Meg Boyle were doing. Like just the idea of like, yeah, you can go shoot a movie on your MacBook Pro, like the camera, and like that's a movie now. And it's just like can just be two people talking in an apartment and like have like it can be powerful through the nuance of like characters talking, and like have all these sorts of like no need for gimmicks. It was like, to me, the extension of Dogma 95, which I love. Lars von Trier is like my favorite filmmaker. So like I was so invested in like what that lineage looked like. But I remember seeing like the cover that like IFC Midnight Sony Pictures Classics, I think, put out Baghead. And on the cover, it's like the most shocking ending. You won't believe what you're seeing, or whatever. I watched it, and it's like a mumblecore movie. It's got like the Duplass's and Greta Gerwig, and they're just like hanging out talking in a cabin. And at the end, like someone shows up and like hits someone with a baseball bat. And it's like, oh my God, like that's not That's not a horror movie. You're billing this as a mumblecore horror movie. It's not a horror movie.
Okay.
So here I am, this teenager. I'm like 18 years old, and I'm thinking like, well, like, what if I made a mumblecore movie that ends with like an ending that's actually worth talking about, where it's like it turns into a fucking like Videodrome at the end, right? It's like, how crazy would that be if you're like sitting here watching a movie that's like a couple talking in an apartment and then it ends with like being The Fly, right? Like, that's an insane thought. So that was the inception for Computer Hearts.
Okay.
So I failed at
that.
I
what?
failed
What
at
are you
that.
talking about? Why?
Because the opening half hour, it is not a solid enough mumblecore movie. I think I shot it to I think I was striving too much for perfection in what I was like trying to do. I think if I'd shot with a looser filmmaking style, if me and my actors had a looser sort of script structure and stuff, so we could have like made the performances more natural. Like Computer Hearts really works at what it is, which is this very clinical Cronenberg type movie.
Okay.
But it wasn't what I was striving for initially. It definitely changed over the creative process. So then after that,
the ending is like full on Tetsuo.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
It's awesome.
So the ending's fantastic. I mean, I did, instead of having a really cool mumblecore movie that turned into like Tetsuo the Iron Man, I ended up with a bad student film that turns into Tetsuo the Iron Man, which I think is like,
that.
which I think is
you're talented.
like,
come on.
Oh no, I'm super. I'm remarkably talented. I mean, I made that movie when I was like 19 years old. I'm not I'm not going to hold myself to that high of a standard. But like, I think the point I'm getting at is that that was the structure I wanted to do with that movie, because structure is something that fascinates me so much with movies, and the ways in which like you can use like genre elements to like enhance like drama and character and all these things happening on screen. So then after that, I made one more film that I directed, which was SIDS, which is my back alley orchiectomy movie, like the super trans movie. I remember when I wrote the script, Dion turned to me and said, "Hey, are you transgender?" And I was like, "We'll see." Like, no, probably not. No. We'll figure that out later. But I was using movies as a lot to kind of cope with my gender identity. Like there was like definitely like, oh, I can do this in art, even though I don't really feel comfortable doing it in like real life yet. But I made SIDS. So when I look at what now, I'm back in the director's chair after 10 years. I'm making this new movie. It has that same playfulness and sort of like almost like prank idea I had with Computer Hearts, which is I'm going to make this like amazing narrative mumblecore Dogma 95 movie. And it's going to end as an extreme horror movie. And the thing is it's going to end as an extreme horror movie with basically a full-blown remake of SIDS happening in a motel room. But it's going to be in color. It's going to be like, it's going to, and I'm not going to give away how the movie ends, but it, to me, and how I've talked with other people about it, may be one of the most extreme things ever put in a movie. Like, I really think so. It makes people,
that's a claim.
It makes people ill when I talk about it. Yeah, so we'll see how people talk about it. But when this movie's done, people are going to say, "Oh my God, you're never going to believe how this 6.5 hour movie ends." And they're going to be right. That's my goal, right?
Sweet.
So, it definitely goes into that direction that, I love with extreme horror. But elevated, like the way I approach the entirety of this Untitled Castration movie is from this perspective of like, I want to make a movie that has an audience not necessarily wanting to go along for the ride with like these really problematic and fucked up characters I'm writing, or with the overall length and unruliness of the film and its structure that bounces around, where it's split into 5 chapters. Each chapter basically has an entirely new set of characters. Like it is an extremely like rough structure for an audience to endure. But I want to be able to push in the same way Dogma 95 tried. It's like, I want to like try to strip as much out of like cinema as possible and boil it down to like whatever the essential elements of it. And like that hour and whatever I sent you, that's like every scene we've shot so far for the movie. Those scenes all take place within the first half of the movie. So those all would occur within like the first 3 hours or so. Right. And there's huge gaps in what I've sent you. Like each scene does not flow in the way it would because we've not shot in order. So even though it feels that way with a lot of it, there are significant numbers of scenes missing that add a lot of narrative context to it.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's going to be very interesting to see how it all comes together. We haven't shot any of the second half of the movie, which is all the stuff that actually requires money. So my goal with it is to at least have the first 3 hours finished by the end of the summer. And with that, we'll see how much longer the second half takes. But it could be very fun for us to release the film in 2 parts or something like that, because it definitely could work in that.
Right. But then the extreme horror would only be in the second part.
Exactly. Right? So exactly. Which is kind of why I want to keep it all one thing, but it's really going to depend on, like, when I talk to people about splitting it, everyone's like, well, I mean, that's nicer for your audience, but you're going to lose the overall, like, momentum that the movie builds towards. So we'll see what happens with it. But I'm really grateful to hear that you liked the dramatic elements, the narrative elements.
Yeah,
I loved it. Because it's definitely not, like, it's experimental in the sense of, like, it has a long running time, but other than that, it's like a very straightforward movie. It's just long.
I think that's what really, like, surprised me about it, was that it seemed a lot more focused on the drama than your other work, you know? So I was really surprised by that. And I thought the acting was really, really good. Like, everything kind of really stepped up, you know, from your previous work, you know? So, yeah.
Well, it's been 10 years, so I would hope so.
and you've been busy since then, because you've been doing, like, editing and cinematography for a lot of other projects, and, like, co-directing with Dion and everything. So it's not like you've been, like, hiding away for 10 years, you know?
No, I've been learning. I mean, like, Dion is, like, such an amazing director. She, like, very changed my perspective on directing and how to work with characters and with cast. And I've definitely, like, borrowed so much from her. And, like, one of the funny things was I felt so limited by screenplays with what I had done earlier, because I wanted to get something that was a more natural vibe. So actually, this movie that we're making now does not have a script. It's I talk through it with my actors. I say, here is the beats we're going to hit going through the scene. Here's what I want you to say. Let's see how we can naturally progress through it. And that's why, like, every scene is almost just one take as people talk. And it's, to me, it's magic. I've never really seen anything like that on film. And I think that's part of the reason why the movie ended up becoming so long, is because I wrote, like, when I wrote my treatment for it of, like, what all the scenes were going to be, the plan was for it to just be a 90-minute movie. But then I was off screening this movie Actors with my buddy Will in Chicago. And I was like introing it. It's like this weird little movie that I was supporting. And
I feel like you've mentioned Actors on your podcast.
I have.
Is there some sort of, is there some controversy behind it? Because I've never seen it, but I'm very curious.
There's a lot of controversy behind it. I don't think it's particularly justified, but it has made a lot more people like aware of the movie. It's made by, like, my friend Betsy, who's, like, one of my favorite people in the whole world, and it's just, like, to me, an incredible movie. Everyone who sees it seems to either like it or really hate it. So I mean, that's how you kind of know it's, like, special. So it's still, like, kind of screening throughout the US, like, just doing, like, one-off event screenings and stuff. So hopefully it ends up on disc or something at some point. But I'm a big fan of that movie, and I flew to Chicago to introduce it for Betsy. So I mean, like, that's how much passionate I am about it. But
sorry.
While I was back to the point. While I was there, I was showing my buddy Will, who was the one who booked Computer Hearts, the music box in Chicago, the first 30 minutes I had of rough cut for the new movie. And I had said to him, hey, I want to cut the movie to be only, like, 90 minutes based on how much I have left. All of these scenes I have are going to have to be, like, probably stripped down, like, the best 5 minutes of them. I have to cut some of the scenes out. We'll see what happens. And we start watching it, and I go to start scrolling forward to be like, here, let me find the next scene I like. And he goes, no, I want to watch the whole thing. So we sit down for, like, 35 minutes, watch the entire half hour that I had so far. And there was no plot in this half hour. It was all just character building and kind of introducing, like, the dynamics between the friends, and, like, who, like, the Noah Baker, his, like, character Turner, who, like, opens the movie in that first, like, hour that you would have seen. It was like all that kind of stuff. none of the plot of the movie. And Will turned to me afterward and he said, "You can't cut a second." And I said, "But the movie will be like 6 hours long. That's totally unreasonable." And he goes, "No, like, this is so watchable. Just let it be a 6 hour movie. It looks like you're making a 6 hour movie." And I said, "Okay, I'm willing to go that far." A lot of people think I'm crazy for doing it. I've heard like people being like, "Oh, that's kind of like, why would you do that?" That's like,
it's very audacious.
Yeah, it's like,
I love that. Yeah.
yeah, it's like who would do it? But like, you know what? I was rewatching Nymphomaniac the other day, which I think that is like a 5 hour Lars von Trier movie. And I was like, this is like so similar to what I'm doing, like in terms of like structure and in terms of like storytelling. And it's like, it's so watchable for the whole movie. Like there's no reason to like think that movies can't be long. I feel like we've trained audiences over the last like 7 years of streaming TV to binge an entire show the second it drops. There's no reason that I can't treat that same like sort of expectation on someone watching a narrative film. Like when Twin Peaks came back, like back in 2017, I remember everyone I knew went and watched the first 4 hours of that in one sitting the first night it came out. So like, there's no reason to think like I'm no David Lynch, like that's not what I'm saying, but I mean like I think that there is like a degree to which people's patience for a long movie is really more determined on how good the story is and how interesting the characters are, as opposed to like what the actual running time is. Like from what you saw, it's like that first hour, even though like nothing really happens in it narratively, it's still very watchable. Like you're invested in it. And like when I've watched the first 2 hours with friends and with people in the industry and like just like randos who are like over visiting another friend in my house or whatever, we watch it and they go like, yeah, I could easily watch another 4 hours of that, you know? So I hope it pays off.
Do you think that there's an element of influence from television then and what you're trying to do here? Because you did mention that like people have been trained to kind of binge watch TV. Do you think that TV is playing into what you're doing?
It's a really interesting question, because I would say I'm more inspired by like a movie like Love Exposure. If you ever saw that,
that's film. I haven't seen it, no, but I know of it.
Because that actually got cut afterwards to be a TV show years later, where they added a couple more scenes. But that's like more my approach, which is like looking at it as a narrative film first, and then as like something that's more episodic second. Like the movie is split into chapters in the way like a movie like Nymphomaniac or Breaking the Waves is. Because like I don't know, I grew up being so inspired by like a filmmaker like Lars von Trier, because he has such like a literary sensibility behind the work he's making. And that just speaks to me. So I wouldn't say TV is like, I think that for me, TV is more so a justification for the audience I'm expecting for this. As opposed to saying that I'm internalizing in the actual work I'm making. I'm actually also developing a TV show that's a book adaptation. And the difference, it's an adaptation of a Canadian book called Little Fish. It's about this, it's written by Casey Platt, who's one of like my favorite writers in the world. She's an amazing transgender writer who's Canadian. From Winnipeg, is where all of her stories take place too, which I think is so cool. And to me, when I'm doing something for TV, it's got to have where every hour ends with a hook, right? It's like, there's got to be something that is structurally there to pull you into the next episode. Whereas with like doing a 6.5 hour movie, there's no hooks. Like you're just like basically flowing from each scene into the next. And even like, the best hook comes in the split between chapters 2 and 3, because that would be the center point of the movie. But that's not like set up to be anything other than just like a sort of like breather for the audience to like take an intermission and then keep going. You know, it's not like I'm trying to do a TV structure.
You should have an intermission.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think there's like going to be a couple of intermissions. I want to get them like, I want to like have animated interludes between the chapters. I think that'd be really cool. There's some really talented artists who I know who I think would be perfect for that, but I need money to like put stuff together. So that's like the whole goal with all this. But I mean, we talk about the running time. I think it just speaks to like my ambition with what I think I can do narratively. And also it's making up for lost time. Like I didn't direct anything for 10 years and write anything for 10 years. That was like entirely like something that fit into like what I wanted cinema to be and like what I'm always striving. Like I make movies that I wish were existed. Like that's always been my whole
that makes
deal.
sense.
It's more so about like what's a movie I would really want to watch, and then that's how I approach making a movie. Like when me and Dion worked together, like movie like Cold and Blowing was, we were talking because we had just we were just like out at the lake, like having a nice like little summer day, and we finished off by watching like a fucking terrible horror movie. Like
what was it?
It was Dia los Muertos, Day of the Dead, or something like that. All Saints Day or something. Oh god, I can't remember it. But it was
I don't know it.
It was like a direct-to-video horror flick that Dion remembered was like a trailer before a bunch of like other horror movies she'd bought. So we'd seeked it out at the video store.
Okay.
Put it on, and we were captivated because it had good characters. And it was a really interesting movie. But then it had, structurally, because it was a zombie film, it had to make sure all the characters got killed. So the characters that we liked, who were up until a point making really smart decisions, suddenly had to make bad choices to get killed. And it was frustrating to watch. Like the movie wasn't like all that bad in terms of like it was, you know, it's a direct to video like horror film from the early 2000s. But it was interesting as like a learning experience for us, because we were like, what's the point in a horror movie making you care about characters only to have them die stupidly? So then Cold and Blowing, it's like, what if we tried to like correct that and make a horror movie where we have characters who kind of just like act like real people who are really relatable, and then like they can make dumb choices that are like based on their characters and are like set up by the progression of the movie. And maybe they don't have the consequences of like getting killed by the monster. Like what if we like kind of keep the audience not really sure how this whole thing's going to go? And like, it was interesting. I mean, like, it's fascinating because the movie itself is something that like I really want to see. I rewatched it last night because me and Dion both were having separate little celebrations because we just got the green light on her next movie. So
Riding Shotgun?
Yes, so that's
cool. Awesome.
That's gonna be happening, which I'm really excited about.
That's awesome.
So because of that, I was going back down memory lane watching Cold and Blowing, and I was kind of like, all these years later, because we made that 6 years ago, I was thinking like, oh man, like maybe I want more kills and more violence and all this stuff. So like, it's kind of funny, like how your attitudes change, right? Because like back then it was like, oh my god, what's like the most interesting dynamic thing we could do? Oh, what if we try to do like a horror movie where no one gets killed by the monster? And then nowadays I'm like, oh, but you know what? I just like seeing people get killed by monsters. Like that's maybe the secret to a good horror movie, right? Like secrets to a good horror movie, extreme violence, and there has to be tits in the first 5 minutes. That's like the only two rules.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
All right. I think that wanting people to get killed by monsters thing is really just like wanting catharsis, right? Like, I think that, exactly, for me, at least, is what I want from a horror film. And I think what really helped with Cold Wind Blowing, I don't want to go into detail and spoil it for anyone listening, but, like, was the ending. Like, the very, very ending, like, the choice of the main character in it. That, to me, felt really nihilistic.
Yes, absolutely.
Which Dion had, like, a totally different perspective on it. But to me, that was like, oh, shit, okay. That's the catharsis I'm getting.
And that's really fascinating because me and my group of friends I watched the movie with had the same experience last night, where I said, well, we were kind of split down the middle between people who thought it was like a cathartic ending where it's like, I'm going to spoil it. I mean, people can go see the movie. I'm going to give a light touch of spoiler. Okay. But like the catharsis of her getting that freedom at the end is to me like kind of like uplifting for me and Dion, because it's like, oh, you know, sometimes you have to just leave your toxic friend group and just like, you know, try to, you know, take care of yourself, right? Whereas like I had other friends who were like, why, like I turned on her, I couldn't believe she made that choice, that was insane. I'm like, well, then we didn't do our job like setting up why she would make that choice. But you know, like having that sort of distinction also speaks to, but then I had people on my side with it, right? So I think that that's kind of the litmus test for the movie, and maybe that's what makes the movie interesting is how you feel about the ending, right? Because
it feels more morally ambiguous, in my opinion. You know, like I can see what you mean, that you had to set up the characters more so that it feels justified. But if you think about the outcome, like, can you really justify that? But that's okay. Like, I love
Who
movies
knows,
that
right?
do that.
It's really interesting, right?
Yeah,
I mean, like,
totally.
it was funny because like Dion was never a big fan in that time of like filmmakers like Lars von Trier or Michael Haneke who kind of like
Right.
play in that space of nihilism. She's like, "Oh, I'm not a nihilist." I'm like, Dion, all your movies end with like the character everyone likes getting like really brutally murdered. Like, come on. But
Well,
like,
I actually said Inferno, though, was a complete detour from that because it ended
yeah,
with the sense of community, and that's a really
that's
uplifting
true.
thing. So, but yeah, go on.
You can like chart mine and Dion's like depression over the course of our film career, actually, and how we approach our characters. But
Yeah.
it is interesting with Cold Wind because I really do feel like that ending does work as this like moral litmus test, like you said. And when we first showed the movie, the first response to it from like a like friend, like sort of like acquaintance we had was like, this made me feel as bad as Funny Games. And I remember Dion was like, "Oh
Whoa.
my god, like I've made a huge mistake.
Yeah.
I don't want to be compared to Michael Haneke." And I was like, "No, that's like the best thing." And she's like totally turned around on it after. I was like, "No, that means that we've made something like really emotionally powerful." And she's like, "Okay, good."
For
It's
sure.
like she wanted to try to make a horror movie that could make people cry, which is like the same thing that we were trying to do with like Hack's Dead Room, and the same thing I'm doing with like the new castration movie. And I mean, that even goes forward into like Riding Shotgun. You know, it's like always trying to make movies where the audience cares enough about the characters that we can actually have an emotional impact on them.
Right.
Even if
Right.
we're having characters who are like, you know, kind of morally compromised or problematic, or like, you know, kind of make bad choices like real people do.
Yeah.
It's still that attempt to try to make the audience sympathetic towards their journey, right?
Yeah.
So that's the whole goal.
It's like good drama in genre, really. You know?
Yeah. And
But
that's the thing, right? Like I
yeah.
approach horror as like a lens through which to view a drama. You
Okay.
know, it's like you have to have like the dramatic story where like the narrative arc is like a character based um like narrative that's like motivated by the character's actions and wants and desires. But then you add the horror movie in to like twist and highlight and like enlighten those attitudes and to like kind of put them under this like much like more hyperbolic sensibility where suddenly
Okay.
these like the horror comes out of like being in that heightened situation. It's like, yeah, we could have made that movie Cold Wind Blowing where it's just the dynamics in the cabin between the group of friends, but having the monster show up suddenly puts everything under a lot more pressure and a lot more
Right.
urgency. So then all the worst qualities of everyone can kind of come out and emerge from that.
Yeah,
Which
and
like, yeah,
it does kind of mesh different genres too in a way. I mean, it kind of makes me think a little bit of like something like From Dusk Till Dawn or
yes,
whatever,
absolutely.
you know? Yeah,
Yes,
like to
totally.
me, like horror always, or not always, but I always look for horror to feel like a ride in a way. So if you have that where it's like the swerve of the genre at a certain point, it's like structurally giving you that kind of experience, you know?
Yeah, well, and that's true of every movie me and Dion made over the last 10 years, right? All of those
Yeah.
movies kind of go back to that structure of Computer Hearts, which is let's introduce something that feels like something else, and then it pivots into horror at a certain point when the story needs it to. And I mean, the fun thing about Riding Shotgun, which I'm so excited to go to Cameron with Dion, is it starts as a genre movie. Like we are right into the action on that film, and
Right.
it's kind of an interesting structural departure for us to start in the genre space and then have it kind of ebb into a more dramatic direction through the middle and then go back to genre at the end. So I'm excited to see how that's received as opposed to our other work, which has kind of been most heavily embraced by people who are more into that like more art house sort of sensibility or direction, right? Because like we make a lot of dramas. I mean, like obviously Computer Hearts is loved by all the edgy gorehound horror people because it goes really
Yeah,
insane.
it's crazy.
But everything else we've made has kind of been a more like I would say like a more artistic exercise in terms of like structure and genre. And like you look at like Hack's Dead Room trying to be like a fake TV special and stuff like that. It's like there's definitely we've always been playful in how we've wanted to approach horror. And I'm really excited because when me and Dion started work on writing Shotgun, it was kind of under this idea of, what if we tried to make something that felt really mainstream? Like, it can still be as artistic as we want to do it, but we want to trick people into thinking it's like a movie that, like, you know, that you can cut a great trailer out of, you know, like something that you're going to watch and be like, holy crap, that looks amazing. It looks insane. And then you get a traditional, like, Dion Copeland movie. So I'm very excited.
Cool.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's going to be just more accessible, you know? Like, I feel like mainstream is so indicative of, like, all these different, like, politics that we were talking about earlier, you know?
Yeah.
Whereas, like,
then let's not use that word. Let's say accessible.
Exactly.
Let's say it's more accessible than, like, all the movies where my penis is getting ripped off, right? Like, let's say that.
But you begin with the castration instead of ending with what?
No,
I'm joking.
No castration. Actually, I don't know. Maybe I can talk Dion into it. We'll see. Maybe we can figure that out. Just open with a cold open castration scene that just goes into the movie. He'll be like, what the hell was that?
I think the experiment then would be, how do we make a film accessible, knowing that the very first scene is a castration scene that doesn't
you know what? I think that we've just come up with whatever my next movie is going to be. I think that's exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's sort of like an irreversible sort of thing, like.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
You have to work on that structure. Yeah.
Yeah. And I see you're wearing the Gaspar Noé t-shirt,
I know.
Is fantastic. I'm a huge fan of his work.
This popped up earlier when you were talking about how you're working on this new project where you don't have really like a script per se. You have these beats that you're working with the actors with. And that's, I'm pretty sure, how Gaspar Noé works as well.
Yes, like, to my understanding.
There's another French director who I'm pretty sure did something kind of similar. Do you know Jean Rollin?
Yes, I love Jean Rollin. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I believe he worked the same way, where he'd write a script and then just be like, see you later, and then just get his actors out. And just
which makes sense, because like his movies definitely have like a very dreamlike structural quality, and that's like kind of what I want to go for as well. Like not dreamlike in, I guess, a Lynchian sensibility, but in a like this like sort of staccato, like you're seeing a lot of glimpses into someone's life, and like it feels really real. And out of that, you get the story of how they're progressing through these like events that happen to them. So like I don't know, I really hope that the new movie works on its feet once the whole thing's together, because it's a bold swing, but I think that we've got an interesting structure, and hopefully an audience is willing to go along with the narrative we've kind of put together. So be interesting.
Yeah. How do you then like appeal to people with this 6.5 hour narrative, you know, more drama-based film, after you completely annihilated Fantastic Fest with
the funny thing was like I kind of the whole movie came about in a way because I was wanting to make another film, but I didn't know what it was going to be. Me and Dion were pitching a movie called Scream Like a Girl that we planned to co-direct because we co-wrote the script, which is like a very straightforward, like Silence of the Lambs-esque thriller, serial killer movie that engages with like snuff films and a bunch of like, you know, my own weirdo interests and Dion's weird interests. And it was a very cool script, but it was something that we kind of wanted money for. So what ended up happening was we were pitching it around and it was not moving forward. So it was like, okay, well, what else can I do for a project? And I had the idea to do a stage play that came to me while doing the 100 Best Kills show, which was a stage play adaptation of SIDS, which would be 3 acts, where the first act is you're seeing a glimpse of like the person who'd end up doing the surgery and like a part of their life. Then second act was like the woman and seeing a glimpse of her life. And the last act was going to take place in the motel room with the surgery occurring as they kind of navigate everything that's come before and how it corresponds to how they're reacting in the surgery environment. So that was this play idea I had. And then I started to get messages from some of these film festivals I've been doing work with and people I've been meeting on the festival circuit with all the work me and Dion have been touring the last 2 years. And everyone's like, well, hey, when's the next movie? Like, just send it to us. We want to see your next movie. So was suddenly like, oh, wait, I've got this story idea that I was going to do as a play. Let's do it as a film, because I know it'll be like something I can pull off inexpensively, because we were going to just do it on stage. So it'd be easier to do it as a movie even. So we just started work on it. We started work like basically the day before I went to Sundance back in January. And it was fun because I was like at Sundance and like on the phone with like what I call my second unit, which was my buddy having to shoot some scenes that we had to get while I was out of town just because of when we see the movie, it'll become clear. I don't want to give too much away, but it was like kind of cool because here I am at Sundance, like at the at the like after party for Infinity Pool, like talking with Mia Goth, and I'm like texting my team being like, "Hey,
Louise, you sound so cool doing that."
No, I know. It's like I like to sound cool. I mean, like now that me and Dion actually have like a big multi-million-dollar movie that's going to go into production, it's like,
whoa,
I can do all my stupid name dropping and feel like the real deal, which is pretty fun.
That's amazing.
Holy shit. Like Ryan Shotgun's got like a $2.5 million budget, so it's gonna be like a huge step up for us, right? Like it's gonna be crazy. Yeah,
congratulations. That's so sick.
Well, I mean, it deserves it. Dion's script is like absolutely incredible. Like I knew when she wrote that.
Wow.
And we were breaking, like, me and Dion would always break the stories together, right? So, like, we're talking through and, like, you could feel the excitement in the air as we were both like, oh, and then what if this happened? What if this happened? And then, like, the script we wrote was like, it was like, we know we need to, like, actually take this in, like, a higher level direction and get, like, stars in it and stuff. And that's what we're putting together right now. So, it's actually going to happen.
That's awesome.
Which is really exciting. Yeah.
Congratulations.
It's going to be a big step up. I mean, like, it'll be fun to be premiering that film after the last 10 years of us making these like extremely outsider, like weird horror projects, right? It's gonna be a huge, huge step forward.
I'll say. I feel like, wow, in like a year's time, my podcast is going to blow up because you guys put out these amazing masterpieces.
I hope so. I mean, like it kind of feels like that, you know, like me and Dion have been kind of on the circuit the last little while, like talking about these projects, and now that they're actually like starting to manifest into like being finished movies, it's gonna be amazing to look back at this time where we were like getting these pieces together as these like two like edgy weird kids coming out of like the underground film scene, just thinking like, oh my god, like is anyone ever gonna want to like trust us with making a bigger movie? And then here we are now, and it's like, like we really paved the way for ourselves to like do something that I think is going to be really quite brilliant. And I'm really excited for people to see these projects.
I'm excited for you and excited to see the final products.
Oh, I thank you. I think that I think that everyone's going to really get a kick out of these two movies. Like Riding Shotgun is a crowd pleaser through and through. It is like one of the most fun movies I've ever read. Like I've done a lot of like group reads with like groups of friends and stuff, and everyone's just like, holy crap, that's like it. It's also a really sexy movie, so I think that's going to be like amazing. And then like with the new Untitled Castration movie, it's like the polar opposite of that. It's like extremely inaccessible, but I think that anyone who's willing to take the patience and sit down and like try to watch it is going to get a huge reward out of the film we put together.
But everything that you've touched on has actually outlined how accessible your project is. I don't think you realize that, you know, like you've already said that people are set up to binge watch hours of a film. You've got it's like great characters, great drama. It's all leading to a payoff. You know what I mean? Like this is what people want from a movie. So I don't think you should. I think
that's exactly what I said. like what do these two movies do? They're both movies that I would be excited to go see. And I think that's like all I can try to do is impress myself. Like I don't know what an audience is ever gonna respond to in the work that we do, but as myself, someone who's just like absolutely deranged in how much I love movies, it's so important to me to make movies that would get me excited, and like making movies that a younger version of myself would have like really wished would have existed, like movies that would have been my favorite movie when I was like 18 years old, you know, like
I love that.
That's got to be the goal, right?
Yeah. I think there's such a cynicism to a lot of people making film where it's like, oh, I just need to make something I know people will like. And those words, they just fall so hollow to me, you know? Like
Yeah.
I think that's what I love about a lot of like underground horror filmmakers, and like you and Dion, is just like there's almost like this punk rock sense to it in a way of
Yeah.
just you guys are just like making really transgressive and interesting and original art that excites people, you know? Like, yeah.
Well, it's totally that punk sensibility, right? Like, I just want to go up, play whatever fucking notes I have that I want to do, and try to impress myself. And I know the cool people are going to show up for it, and that's like all that really matters. I mean, like, the audience we've cultivated for our work so far are the best people I've ever met in my life. Like, it's so exciting whenever I meet people who say that their work had my work and Dion's work had an effect on them. I'm always like, how could I ask for a cooler audience? You know, like, it's always people who are just like so awesome and so talented and so cool.
Yeah.
And like, how could I complain? It's honestly, it's blessed that I've been able to make the work I've wanted to make, and there's been people who've responded to it, and that's the dream as an artist.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe then, like, I'm just kind of thinking about this now, but you were kind of saying that you feel like you want to dig yourself out of like extreme horror in a way because of how it's become like more right wing, and maybe it's because it's become more of like this pessimistic place, and that with you and Dion, you both really want to do something actually that's more uplifting in a weird way. Like, you're not shedding the transgression, you're not shedding the originality or the punk rock sensibility, but you've got more of like a positivity to what you're doing, you know?
Well, and it's really funny because when I saw that movie Actors, it actually like reinvigorated me, because it was an underground movie through and through that was controversial and was like kind of playing some of the same notes as the stuff I was responding to when I wanted to leave the underground, but doing it in such an exciting new way that it actually brought me back in, where post Cold Wind Blowing, me and Dion definitely started to go like, you know what, let's go back into being transgressive. So like, Riding Shotgun is like still got like those transgressive horror elements, like cranked up way more than the last few years of what we've been doing. Like, Castration Movie is definitely something that like pushes those buttons and is like extreme like underground horror flick through and through, even though it takes it in a lot of other directions as well. Because like I do think that, as I said, people are hungry for like fucked up movies, like on like the whole, and like I think that it's silly to just like say, okay, well, the underground's lost to like this certain type of person. I'd rather be like, no, let's bring it back. And like, I have met, and like, me and Dion toured all around the festival circuit last year, and we met some filmmakers doing the most incredible work I've ever seen in my life. Like, our buddy Alex Phillips, who made All Jacked Up and Full of Worms, and
I've heard of
our
that.
friend and our friend Vera Drew, who made The People's Joker. It's like, these are underground movies that are like fresh and new and exciting. Or like, my friend Avalon Fast made this movie Honeycomb, and it's like, these are all like, these are like brilliant new underground movies that are transgressive in their own way, and it's like forming a new canon. So it was like, okay, like, let's unite these filmmakers. Like, with Castration Movie, it's like I asked Vera Drew to be in my movie because I loved her film.
Cool.
I asked Avalon Fast to be in my film because I loved her film. I asked my friend Betsy Brown, who made Actors, to be in my film. And it's just like, let's unite this whole underground as a new scene. Like, my friend like Alice McKay, who's like the other trans girl making like some of the coolest freaking horror movies right now. She made a film called So Vam a couple years ago that was on Shudder. Her new films, T Blockers and Satanic Panic, that are both coming out this year, are like amazing, like so cool. Like, they're totally new filmmaking. It's underground. It's that underground sensibility. Like, they remind me of the sort of like cool stuff I grew up like renting that had like the Trauma Distribution logo on it. But it's like new and exciting and super cool. And like, I'm just happy that this has now swung back in a direction where like, not only do I want to be a part of it, but I want to like lead it and group it together and make it this like new underground scene, and like try to like really push these filmmakers up. And like, between all those films, like, there's other movies like my friends Logan Freeman made this film called Brain Death that fits into that wheelhouse as well. Like, I should start cataloging and writing about these movies, honestly.
Please.
I mean, I guess that's actually what mine and Aoife's podcast is for, was like, we covered all of these films on the podcast. So I guess it's like a means for us to like say, hey, here's where the underground was and why I liked the underground. And then me coming in now and be like, Aoife, look at these newer ones. Do you like them? And she's like, hell yeah, these are amazing. And it was like so great. Like we went off and there was a great screening of Honeycomb here like a couple weeks ago. And me and Aoife went out and with Aoife's fiance Magda, who's also in Castration movie. And you know, we're all just like going out and it's like, cool. We get to go see like a cool new underground horror movie on the big screen here in Vancouver. It's like liberating. It feels amazing that the scene's coming back and it's getting some sort of like power and foothold into like the modern, like sort of like artistic fabric, you know? And like, I think it's a wonderful language for filmmaking. And I'm so happy to be back in that spirit now. Like, it feels great to have reclaimed it over the last several years.
Yeah. I remember listening to your episode on Honeycomb, and I tried to track it down. I don't know if I could. I don't think I found it online or anything. But so that's the only thing is a lot of these films, it's just like getting them distributed properly. Because it's like everything you named, I feel like I tried to look up at some point and couldn't find anywhere, you know?
Yeah, and we're trying to fix that. I mean, me, Dion, our friend Will, have been talking about starting a distribution label for these films specifically. It's just a question of, before really pulling the trigger on it, it's trying to determine whether or not we think there could be an audience for them. Yeah. So we're trying to sort of build the hype, let this stuff like sort of like permeate through the atmosphere and see if the demand starts to be there. Then we can start putting some of these movies out on like streaming and on disc and stuff, and hopefully there will be a audience who's excited and hungry for these types of movies. So we'll see where that goes over the next year. Because I would love to start putting these out. Like me and Dion had a background in film distribution. That's like one of the first things we started getting into.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah, no, like when we made Computer Hearts, we couldn't get into any festivals, and it was like too awkward to get distribution for because of its running time. So we ended up self-distributing it, and then like kept on like distributing more stuff in like small run like releases. And we kind of fell out of that just because it was a hell of a lot of work, and we didn't really have like the industry accessibility yet to really like, you know, go to festivals and actually try to acquire movies and build that up more. But now we're like in a place where it's like, man, like we love our taste in this sort of work, and we trust ourselves and think that we could maybe make something out of this sort of like new underground scene. So I don't know, might be dipping our toes back in the water there and try to take it off, right? Could be good.
Yeah. Well, if there's any way I can help, let me know.
Of course. Well, I mean,
that sounds amazing.
We'll get back on to talk about it, the two of us, at some point.
Yeah.
So,
that'd be awesome.
We're going to be busy with, the problem is we're going to be so busy with riding shotgun over the next 6 months that's going to take up all of our time. But I do still care about the little sub $10,000 movies that all of my friends are making. So I really keep supporting those too.
Yeah.
But hopefully the big movies can help fund my, my little passion projects on the side too. Right. Like, that's one of the exciting things, is regardless of what happens with like the financing for Castration movie, either through the crowdfunding campaign we did or through alternate means like grant applications or whatever, at the very least, me and Dion have got that breakthrough into the industry where I always respected filmmakers who could do their bigger projects and then could go do something smaller on the side. And this will hopefully give us that freedom to keep pursuing that, right? Like, if I make any money off of riding shotgun, the first thing I'm going to want to do is pour it into all of the projects being made by these amazing filmmakers who are doing stuff for a small amount of money. You know, like I just, I want to make sure that those people get to keep making movies. I think it's so important to have those voices.
Yeah. You got to give back to the community, right?
Yeah. I mean, like what else? Like, as I said, I love movies more than anything. Like that's, what other points is there in life? I just want to make a bunch of cool movies before I leave this earth, you know?
Yeah. I really randomly wanted to ask you, because you were mentioning all the cool new horror movies you watched, what you thought of The Sadness?
The Sadness is good. I had, I think I had a clip of it in my show, didn't I? Was there a clip of The Sadness?
Oh, you did? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
I did indeed. That one's really extreme. That's an extreme flick.
Yeah, I loved it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I subject friends to it whenever I get a chance because it's one of those films that's like, okay, I know you don't like extreme horror films. I know you don't like going too far. This kind of goes right up to the edge a lot of the times, you
It's
know?
extremely nihilistic, though. That's like one thing I'll say about
Yeah,
it.
I love that.
It's more fun just as like the spectacle of it,
Yeah,
as
yeah.
opposed to be like there's not really a satisfying story in there.
Not
Um,
really.
but it definitely like it definitely fucks you up. Which
Yeah,
I mean, like that's the point of the movie. I mean, like some movies, that's what they should be, right? I'm happy those movies exist.
yeah, for sure, for
But yeah, I
sure.
definitely had a clip of when the guy gets slammed into the barbed wire.
Yeah, yeah. No, I honestly like. I don't know if you'd be able to share it or even just email it to me, but like the list of all the films you included, because there was at least like 10 that I was like, okay, I really want to see that. What was that?
Yes, I do have a PD or a Google Doc or whatever that has a list of
Okay,
everything, every castration scene in every movie, and then all the
okay,
ones highlight for what I actually put in the show. And
okay,
one of the fun things I wanted to do, this either will exist or will not exist depending on how the Kickstarter turned out, was I was going to put that Fantastic Fest show onto a mixtape, and I was going to add in all the rest of the clips that I didn't have time to include.
oh wow.
So that would be a cool thing that might exist now. I do not know if it exists. If it does, then I will get you a copy of it.
Awesome, awesome. I haven't actually dabbled in the mixtape scene. Like, are you familiar with it at all?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, like
Okay,
I grew up in like tape trading and stuff like that because I'd go
okay,
to conventions. And that's where I found all the cool movies. I mean, Dion, when she worked at the video store here, Videomatica, her partner at the video store, who was one of her coworkers or whatever, Robin Boogie, he would do mixtapes. So he had his there at the store. Like his were called like Retardotron or something, and they were just like
okay,
really weird assemblages of clips. But I've always
okay.
been a fan of like the weird mixtape things, and like it's
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
fun because like they do those iceberg charts of like fucked
Oh
up
yeah,
movies.
yeah, yeah,
And I was
yeah.
like giggling when I saw one because I was like, oh my God, that's my buddy's mixtape on there or whatever. Like
Oh
I
no
remember when
way.
he I remember when he annoyingly kept tagging me in all the posts when he was trying to promote it or whatever. Like it's just
Yeah,
like it's so funny how like now like some of these like I grew up in the underground scene, so I knew all these people, and
yeah,
then all of a sudden like we're at a time when like because of TikTok and like there's
sure.
like an interest in really fucking weird movies again. So you're seeing the ways in which they're promoted through like memes and stuff. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
and it's like, oh my God, this is like the most unhinged film ever made. I'm like, that was my buddy made that movie. That's like
Oh
crazy. Okay.
really?
Like
Wow, wow,
it's
wow.
just so weird.
Yeah.
Like I remember my friend Will was telling me like they screened 964 Pinocchio at the Music Box. And
Oh,
afterwards,
I love that
I
movie.
love that film.
Yeah. Oh
And
wait, Transpanic. Didn't
yeah,
you
we
cover
covered it.
that? Okay,
We did
right, right,
cover it
yeah.
along with Joel Petroikis' movie Buzzard, which I
Yeah,
also love
I like that
Petroikis.
movie too.
Yeah, I love Petroikis. But
Mm.
like, Will was telling me that like these like two like teenagers, so like 18 years old or younger, came out of the movie and like thanked him personally for screening it because they were going through a list of like most fucked up movies ever made, and they just hit that movie and noticed it was screening at their theater.
Yeah.
And it's like I just love the idea of like young people being like, okay, like let's just like try to watch all the fucked up movies. It's like that was how I grew
Right,
up,
right.
but my
Yeah.
exposure to them was through like torrenting and like the like IMDb message boards, like talking with people trying to find like the weirdest possible stuff. Whereas
Right.
like nowadays, like it almost feels like we were talking about accessibility. Like you can find this stuff so easily, and I think that's really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, well, when you mentioned that you're trying to I don't know if I'm putting words in your mouth here, but you're saying that like the ending of the 6.5 hour project is going to be one of the most extreme horror films ever. It made me think of a film that I watched last year called Split that was advertised. Do you know this about Split? Have you heard about this?
Which Split? There's so many movies
Um,
called Split.
oh, my bad, my bad. It's like a new extreme horror film that's like two short films put together, and
Hmm.
one is by Dylan Mulvaney, and the other one is by a collective called White Gardenia.
Really?
Yeah.
I've never heard of this. White Gardenia. Okay, I'm gonna
Um.
do a quick Google. I'm very curious about this now. Jack Malvernati and White
Oh.
Gardenia.
Yeah. 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 And so I would say that the White Gardenia segment was one of the most terrifying things I've ever watched. And they actually, in
Ooh.
the advertisement of it, said that if you don't think it's the most extreme horror film you've ever seen, that will give you your money back. And I don't know if I would say that was true, but I also was like, I'm not going to give you the money. Or sorry, I'm not going to ask for my money back.
Oh, this sounds amazing. Okay, yeah, the White Gardenia stuff sounds hilarious.
It's like it's what's the word I'm looking for? It's non-simulated. So they do it's like
what parts of it are unsimulated? Because it sounds like it's a guy self-mutilating himself. In what ways is he self-mutilating himself?
Some Bob Flanagan-esque escapades.
Oh, like
yeah.
Does he drive a nail through his dick?
His testicles?
Really? No shit.
Yeah, and then there's another scene where you're not gonna believe this. He cuts off his finger and cooks it, and then they eat like a little bit of it.
For real?
For real, yeah.
That's insane. That's so cool. What a psychopath.
Yeah, he seemed like a really nice guy when I messaged with him. But
and he was still missing the finger, I assume.
I don't think he ever got it back, no.
I doubt it. That's a commitment to art. I mean, I do a lot of unsimulated things in castration movie.
Okay.
Now it feels like it's up the ante where I have to do more. Honestly,
okay, I'm so sorry I said that.
Because I do have a scene where I inject something into my testicles for real. But that's just a needle going into testicles. This guy puts a nail through his testicles. That's
yeah.
I'll have to do the Bob Flanagan. I was considering it. Now this is like cemented. I might have to do the Bob Flanagan.
I personally don't know how I feel about the whole like unsimulated versus simulated thing. And I mean, like, people can do whatever they want, but it's just like a part of me I almost miss the magic trick of film at that point. You know what I mean?
Then I'm so excited to talk about this, because that was one of the thoughts I had with this new castration movie. Was I was like, all right, it ends on the big castration scene at the end, right?
Okay.
So my idea was, I'm going to show a lot of stuff that's unsimulated throughout the first 5 hours of the movie.
Okay.
Such as self-harm and I'd like myself like putting a needle into my testicles and stuff. And then there's a lot of unsimulated sex in the movie. Okay. So the idea was do all these things so that by the time you get to the actual special effects scene, the audience will be like, I actually don't know if that's real or not. Right? Like that's got to be the goal. So, but now that this guy did, maybe I have to go all the way. I mean, Dion actually texted me last night being like, hey, can you like promise you won't go like do anything too crazy to your body making this movie? And I was like, oh, don't worry. But now I might have to revoke that promise. You've inspired me.
No. I don't want to be the one. I'm gonna be
this scene was brought to you by Bob.
I really, really think about it.
I'm joking, by the way.
Okay. I'm only like, I only believed it for a second because
although I'm really happy that I have a brand that made you think I was serious, and that's like that's exciting.
It's not okay. It's not that you have that brand, because from what I understand, all your prior work has been like prosthetic effects.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Of course. Yeah.
Effects, right.
Yeah.
So it's just the fact that exists out there. Do you know what I mean? People could do it.
But like, what's the point, right? Like, I mean, like, push yourself to art, but like, I mean, it doesn't sound like this exists. Like, it doesn't sound like that's anything but shock value in that movie that you've brought up, right? It's like, it's like, what's the story connotations, right? Like, I could do the most extreme shit possible, but like, the audience isn't going to care unless there's like a narrative purpose for this, right? That's the goal. you got to make the audience actually care about it, or else it's just shock for shock's sake. And like, I love good shock movies. Like I've watched a lot of fucked up shock movies, but like I remember on our podcast I showed Aoife Guinea Pig, Flowers of Flesh and Blood, and she was like, wow, that movie like far surpasses its reputation. Like that's like actually a really artistic movie with a lot to say. Mm-hmm. And then we watched for our second episode, we recorded an episode that was a double thing on tumbling doll flesh and actors, but I didn't feel comfortable posting it because I got a little bit too insider baseball with what I was talking about. But with regards to tumbling doll flesh, Aoife and I were watching it. We were bored. It's like you can only watch someone like have an enema so many times and be like, this is like, is this art? Like, I don't know. Like, what's the point? What's the purpose of it? Like, it lacks that like sublime quality that like a guinea pig movie has, where like the guinea pig movies were always still trying to be like artistic in some way, right? So
you need something more like water power, I guess, eh?
I love water power.
I haven't seen it yet. I gotta see it.
That was how I made an initial connection with. That's how I made like an initial connection with Vinegar Syndrome. Was
shit!
I had produced the release of Taking Tiger Mountain with them, which was Bill Paxton's first movie.
Oh, no way!
And I think the reason why they trusted me to work with it was because Joe Rubin is a huge fan of water power, and when I brought it up while we were talking in terms of like fucked up movies we liked, and we bonded very immensely over that. Right back when I was like 18 years old, trying to be like, oh yeah, I can restore a movie. Let's figure this out. So that was like, water power has a special place in both my heart and in the history of my career, which I think is important.
Yeah. You know who is also a huge fan of water power that I feel like you should connect with if you haven't with yet is Kayla Jeunesse.
Of course. Me and Dion are good, like friends with Kayla. Yeah, we hang out all the time.
Sick.
Kayla's actually the other reason I moved to Vancouver. I mean, Kayla like changed my whole life, which like people always say that's really like I met her around the same time I was at that Splatterfest thing meeting Ryan, which was at the Calgary Underground Film Festival. Mm-hmm. Kayla was like a guest of honor to do this like Saturday morning cartoon breakfast thing, and then also this documentary she was in had just come out. And so I met Kayla, and one of my friends who helped with running all of the events there, Greg, he was like, I used to be the bouncer for Kayla's Cinemorte Film Festival in Vancouver. So I got talking with Kayla, and I had never met anyone so cool in my entire life. And I was like, I want to be this person. I was like, I want to be this person. Like, this is like exactly what I would imagine my future looking like, as like someone who like loves movies like this and actually like does things with movies and runs cool film festivals. So like when I moved out to Vancouver, my first like major goal was like, get in at like the film society at my campus, and then like trying to do events like she did. Like Kayla famously did this thing called Torture Garden, which was a screening series where you'd sign up to come in, and then she'd show like a couple hours of really fucking disturbing shit. And it was free to enter, but you had to pay to leave, and the price went down the longer you stayed.
Wow.
And I did that at the Film Society because like I was just so obsessed with what Kayla was doing with programming.
Yeah.
And it was really fun.
You did a Torture Garden as well, kind of thing.
Yeah, I stole it from Kayla, and I did one myself, and it was very fun. It was a
Can I ask what you showed?
Geez, you know what? I wish I had a full list of it, but it was a lot of Viennese actionist films. I bet I have it on. I bet I have it on Letterboxd somewhere. Here. Yeah, just give me 30 seconds, because I definitely have a Letterboxd list with this in it.
Oh, sweet. Okay. Maybe I'll like link it in the show notes.
Maybe it's like a list of everything we screened at the campus cinema, because Dion was the main programmer the first year that we ran the cinema. Yeah. And then she'd indulge me getting to do crazy things every now and then, which I thought was very sweet of her. Yeah.
So was it successful? Like, were people...
We didn't have a huge number of people come out. Okay. Oh no, did I not list all of them? Oh yeah, here it is. Okay. So here's what I showed. We started the night with Eraserhead, just as like a fun thing to do.
Yeah.
And then the Torture Garden started with the Burlesque Suicide number 2, 1902.
Oh. What is 1902? How bad could
yes.
that be?
Yeah, it's like someone like killing themselves, I guess, on camera.
Like for real?
No, not for real.
Okay.
And then there was a segment from To Each His Own Cinema. I can't remember which one it was.
Okay.
I could probably find it somewhere. Then we had The Dancing Pig from 1907. One Got Fat from 1963, which is a bike safety film, which is very fun. Harpia from 1979, the animated shorts. Curious Alice from 1971, which is like a anti-drug PSA. I showed my movie SIDS, I guess, which is fun. I forgot about that.
You gotta do
it. Then I showed some Christian Boltanski shorts, which he's just like a weird experimental filmmaker who makes some of the scariest shit I've ever seen. Then a movie called Shoot from 1971, which is a guy who just gets shot with a gun as an art film. Just gets shot with a rifle in the shoulder.
I saw someone made a T-shirt of that artist.
Really?
They're selling on Instagram. Sick. Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. Then I showed Self-Mutilation, which is a Viennese actionist film. Then I showed something called Human Zoo by a Japanese animator named Yoji Kuri, who does like really like fucking weird misogynistic animated films. Then
I'm not surprised. Japanese,
Another Christian Boltanski short called the Coughing Man, which is like post-COVID is kind of like would be the scariest movie ever because it's just a guy in this like dirty room just like coughing like the worst cough you've ever heard in your life. It's amazing.
Okay. What then, was there? Oh, sorry. You said that no one walked out?
No one walked out, which surprised me. But I think that we only attracted sickos in the first place.
Gotcha.
Mom and Dad, or Mama und Papa, which is another Viennese actionist film.
Oh, okay.
And then Ken Russell's Genius, A Kitten for Hitler, which is like
what the hell is that?
Okay, so Ken Russell made a movie for like some like Funny or Die type website in the late 2000s. Okay. That's just like a short film that was his attempt at trying to make them. He was like, nothing's transgressive anymore, so I'm just going to try to make the most offensive movie ever made. And it's about this like young boy who thinks that he can stop the Holocaust if he brings Hitler a kitten. And it is the most it is genius in how offensive it plays. Like the escalation of the jokes over that like 15 minutes is like absolutely hysterical.
Imagine screening that before Jojo Rabbit.
Oh, you know what? I don't know what would have been more or less offensive. Like awesome. And then I showed Valley Export's amazing short art film Remote, which is her just like self-mutilating, where she's like cutting her cuticles and then dipping them in this bowl of milk for like 10 minutes. It's like extreme. And then I showed, to me, what's one of my like favorite, like most extreme movies I've ever seen, which is a 7-minute short film. That's also a Viennese action film that's called Maria Conception Action, Herben Nietzsche. And it's a movie where you've got this person being crucified while they're like in this like slaughterhouse room, and everyone's kind of like doing sexual play with all like the dead animals and stuff. It's like really cool.
Oh, okay.
And it's like super blasphemous and like has like this great like weird haunting like drone music and stuff over it. It's awesome. But like so that was like 2 hours of just like insane crazy short films.
I take it people were probably like getting drunk or high when they were doing like watching this, right? Was that a way?
It was kind of weird because like we didn't have a huge audience at the campus cinema. Because I'd show a lot of like weird stuff. Like I'd show like a movie like Go Second Time Virgin, or like
a Doris Wish.
Yeah, I love that movie. Or like a Doris Wishman movie, or like a movie like Violated Angels or something.
Yeah,
that's great. Instead of having like a bunch of college students coming out, it was usually people who were like really total like fucking weirdos like myself, who were just excited to have the chance to see this stuff on the big screen. So like when I was doing like a screening of like one of my like really weird esoteric picks, it was always like the same group of like 7 to 10 people showing up who were like there for what I was showing, like and that was like pretty exciting. for me, like,
yeah, that's
like having,
kind of,
yeah.
it kind of makes me think of when a screening can feel like you're going to a concert in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like way tamer compared to what you're talking about, but there was a theater in Toronto called the Kingsway that used to do these like free horror movie nights where they would play like Italian horror films. They'd play like obscure 80s stuff. And so my friends and I would go, and it would just feel almost like a show. Like half the audience would be like metalheads and punks, you know what I mean? And we're just sitting there like drinking beers and watching these horror films. And then I think something happened where like the owner turned out like over the course of the pandemic to be like an anti-vaxxer, like scamdemic or whatever kind of person. So we had to stop going.
Yeah, I mean, you could have kept going. I would have kept going. I don't
really?
care. I don't.
Okay.
I care so. Movies trump everything else. I have like my morals are. Is the movie good? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I definitely. I'm a leftist or whatever, but like,
yeah,
I've definitely dipped my toes into some fucked up places just in order to see cool movies over the years.
Okay.
So I don't. It's always worth it for me. I like movies. I mean, the better thing is when you and your cool friends can get the power to show them yourself, right? Like,
it's something
like
that
I definitely have some in jokes in my movie. Like one of the things is like in the Untitled Castration movie, my character's like pajama shirt is like a Cinefamily t-shirt, which is like a deep cut for.
Oh, Cinefamily. That sounds familiar. What is it?
If you do research on it, it's like, oh, that's a crazy choice to have in a movie. Like it's just one of those.
Okay.
Yeah, if anyone wants to Google that, I'm sure the first few articles will not be good, but it was something that was like really important for film culture, right? So it's just like that weird interplay of like, like when you love movies as much as like people like me or my buddy Will or Dion, it's like sometimes like you end up in some fucked up situations just because you're a fan of films. And it's kind of it's a rough lifestyle being in the arts, especially the film industry, because there's always a lot of money sometimes and a lot of sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
All right. That was the perfect time to take a like puff on the cigarette, like sex.
Yeah, no, if you're not watching this podcast visually, you would see me chain smoking through the entire thing.
Not the entire thing. You were more casual about it. I would say that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's because I'm so relaxed. I've got $1 million movie going into production. Like, what could I possibly be worried about? Yeah, multi-million-dollar movie. I'm like, I'm set. This is gonna be awesome.
Okay, well, we are approaching the hour-and-a-half mark, so I feel like we should wrap it up so I can let you get back to your incredible busy schedule of making awesome movies.
Making 2 movies. I'm shooting, as a matter of fact, like the weekend we're recording this, I'm shooting a music video, which should be out by the time this drops, which is for the artist Lauren Boosfeld, who I've always been a huge fan of. And we connected recently and said, hey, we should collaborate. And it turned into this music video, which the music video is a homage to August Underground's Mortem. So I think that people will have a very good time with it after having listened to this conversation. Go check out that music video for a song called Hazer. And it'll fuck you up, which is exactly what I want to do with movies, is fuck people up.
It sounds very death metal. Like, I think I've seen a death metal video that was like an homage to August Underground.
That rocks, like that's sick. Like, why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
What's your favorite of the 3? And I've only seen one of them. I'm probably going to grab the box set, but what's your favorite of the 3? Mortem.
That's
the second one, right?
That's the second one. You had Krusty in there. Like, having the chick in there is so important. Like,
she's not in the first one.
Not in the first one. No, that's just Fred. Okay. Just Fred's the killer in the first one. And then they say, hey, let's add in, like, you've got the chick, and then you've got Maggot in there, and it's like those two are so fucked up that like the movie opens with like the lead girl Christy like just like cutting her stomach open for real. I think could be simulated. Who knows?
I think it's simulated. I heard is it Fred Vogel? He talked about it on a podcast,
Oh, sweet. If it's simulated, that's even cooler. Because like it's one of those effects that you're like, I actually can't tell. I don't know if we're going to do it simulated in the music video or not. You'll just have to watch it and try to come up with your own mind, right?
Okay.
But I love that.
Yeah,
I love the second August Underground. I think it's a wickedly cool movie. I mean, we covered it on the Trans Panic podcast. So if anyone wants to go listen to our episode on it, we have a very long conversation about why that movie's cool. Definitely worth it to listen to.
You sold the hell out of it. I'll say that much.
Thank you.
So before we wrap, just have a quick little questionnaire. My buddy Jared, that I occasionally do these interviews with, it's just like a rapid fire, like, ba-da-da, ba-da-da, you know what I mean? You can take your time with answering, of course. But all right, so tea or coffee?
Coffee.
All right. Choose one film for the rest of your life.
Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me.
Ooh, that's a good pick. Okay. If you had to be an animal, which would you choose?
Raccoon.
Interesting. Very Toronto of you. What happens when we die?
What a question. Pass. Pass.
Pass. I like that. Okay, and last one. Song title that best describes your life.
Oh, okay. I Am Not Afraid by Owen Pallett.
Ooh, okay. Another Toronto pick. Owen Pallett, yeah. Okay. Well, that was great. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. I'll definitely keep an eye on the projects and everything. And I'll let you know when this episode's coming out.
No, it's great. I mean, I know me and Dion both had a good time talking with you. So maybe we'll come plug the new movie in a year, right? I think that'd be a good time.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Yeah, we'll get all three of us on, or?
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Okay.
Awesome.
Cool,
awesome.
Cool.
Thanks, Bob. Okay. You have a good one.
Yeah. You too. Take care.